he talks about his Kianos hair, blue. So, but the point is that we use words to remember colors, but we can't actually remember the color itself. In other words, sensations are not really something that are stored in your memory. Ideas about the sensations are stored in your memory. And pictures are always stored in your memory as abstractions, right? Because we couldn't remember things if we didn't have abstract symbols for them in our head. Even people. You know, the tools your brain uses to remember people are very simplified ideas about the shape of their head and, you know, the number of teeth that they have, things like that. You know, it's so.
But the color conveys emotion. You can't say.
Right. The color still has meaning, though. Why does anybody think that when people saw the planet Mars in ancient times, it made them think of what? War. Why? Red.
What?
Reminded them of blood.
You've got a what?
Yeah. Yeah. No. So colors have. So colors have meaning, and that's an important
They
element
have
of this.
personalities. Colors have personalities.
They have
in and of
personalities.
themselves.
And they
So
have
when you s-
personalities.
When you say color has nothing to do with the subject matter, that confuses me, because like,
No, I don't say it has nothing to do with the subject matter.
Yeah, you
I'm just
said-
saying that color composition, I'm talking about color composition as something which is not about describing a subject, as a separate element. And so like when you learn to be an artist, when you learn to paint, you know, your education goes through stages. And generally speaking, you're taught to draw, say, the figure and perspective separately, and then you're taught pure design, you know, usually black and white design, geometrical design, things that have nothing to do with the subject, okay? And then you're taught ideas about color, then you're taught painting technique. In other words, you're taught these things separately. You don't learn to play the piano by sitting down and practicing the Rock 3 and just keep on practicing until you can play it. You might learn to play that piece of music, but you would not be a pianist, right? So art is like that. In other words, you learn the elements, you learn to control them separately, and then you have much more ability to control what you do. If you think of all of the problems as being intertwined, that's very debilitating. Okay, so one of the main principles that I adhere to when I'm teaching is to try and tell people, if you're trying to do something hard, and painting is hard, it's really hard, but if you're trying to do something hard, so let's say you're not only trying to paint, but you have a really difficult painting you're trying to do. Maybe it's very big, or very complicated, or maybe the subject is very elaborate, or, you know, it's, in other words, you have a hard task. Maybe you're like me when I was young, making a 1,000 square foot landscape in a giraffe cage on 23 feet of scaffolding, and it has to be bulletproof. Okay, I actually had that problem. Well, you don't just solve all those problems at once. You take the problems one at a time and you solve them. Okay, so the idea of technology, any technology, and art is all technology, the idea is if you have a difficult task, you separate the problems. You separate the tasks and solve them one at a time. Trying to solve them all simultaneously is just not wise. So that's what we're talking about with color composition, is separating out this one idea. I'm going to make a picture. It's going to have a combination of colors. I have to choose the colors. I have to make them work together. And I have to get their relationship to make sense. Because one of the things that was proved by science in the late 19th century, and especially in the 20th century, is that color only exists in comparison to other color. You all know that color is a construct of your mind, right? Here, this color blue is the same thing as radio waves. It's the same thing as X-rays. It's the same thing as microwaves. Exactly the same thing, just a different frequency. And the difference between these colors is all just differences in the frequencies. What makes it color is that your mind has translated into some meaning. But without the difference in the colors, it's not color. You don't understand that?
No.
Well, I'll give you an example. They did experiments where they put someone in a room that was completely black. I mean black velvet, would not reflect any light at any time. And then they would put a box with a light on it which would illuminate the box and nothing else. And it didn't matter if the box was blue or bright red or orange or green. It looked exactly the same. Our mind does not register color without a context. Okay, so that's what so that's why Joseph Alves wrote this book called The Interaction of Color, which is all about how colors relate to each other. And painting is all about how colors relate to each other. And that's what color composition is all about. Make sure that I have enough time to actually do something. So I brought in these two little color studies. Has anybody actually gone to the gallery and seen my show?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
There's a little manifesto called Numerology about the numbers 2 and 4.
Yes.
Okay, so I made, these are two studies about the numbers 2 and 4. You see this is number 4. And you can see this is number 2 and the number 4 at the same time.
Picasso, yes.
Okay, now you can see that this picture is also a landscape, right? You can see that. Why is it landscape? The choice of colors makes it a landscape, right? So that's why what you're saying, or somebody else is saying, that yes, the color has meaning of its own. It will, certain combination of colors will convey a subject without describing the subject. Do you understand what I'm talking about now? Without describing the subject, it will simply speak the subject. That's what colorists try to do. They try to use the color to communicate on its own without other information. Like, there are no pictures of leaves or blades of grass here. But you get the idea. You see what I'm saying? The color speaks on its own. This has 5 neutral colors in it. Okay, 4 different grays and a white. This is a white that I made. It's not pure white. It's a white that I mixed. So I do things like this because, as a landscape painter, if I look around in my studio and I see a bunch of paintings that all have the same colors, I get the feeling that I'm not painting anymore. There doesn't seem to be any point to go on doing it. So it's very important for me that as I continue to make paintings, that the ideas in the paintings are not the same ideas over and over again. And, you know, realism, this is why realism became a problem to many, many painters in the late 19th and 20th century, because it started to look like the same thing over and over again. So artists tried to start to figure out, well, how can I make it look new? I mean, how can I make it look unlike other paintings? Now, when I left the house, of course, I couldn't find the very book I was looking for, but these were partly inspired by Richard Diebenkorn, who did a whole series of pictures, which I don't have with me. I can only show you 1 or 2, which were called Clubs and Spades. And they were all paintings which were 1/2 of a club and 1/2 of a spade. Like if you'd taken 2 playing cards and cut them in half and stuck them together. An idea with no meaning, obviously, right? In other words, the idea itself had no meaning. It was simply something which was a different arrangement of shapes on which he could experiment.